Hey everyone, I hope you guys are enjoying Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak in whichever platform you're choosing to play it on. And today I wanted to host a little bit of a discussion topic regarding the potential of the next mainline Monster Hunter game, Generation 6, or as we're calling it for right now, of course temporarily, Monster Hunter 6, Monster Hunter World 2, Monster Hunter Paradise. Naming conventions aside, I always like to give that disclaimer because ultimately it doesn't matter what they end up calling it. We'll love it nonetheless. Hopefully it's a good game, obviously. And I want to talk about the potential of this next mainline Monster Hunter game appearing on, of course, the next mainline Nintendo Switch 2, or whatever they end up calling it, Nintendo Switch Next, Super Nintendo Switch, whatever. Naming, again, conventions aside. We shouldn't expect this next Monster Hunter game to run on the base Nintendo Switch, the one that we all have right now, for obvious reasons. We expect the next Monster Hunter game to be built off of the base of Monster Hunter World. They're not going to use Rise or Sunbreak to build off the next game. We shouldn't expect that. It would be a massive surprise, I would argue, for a lot of players if they see the next Monster Hunter game to look similar to Rise and Sunbreak other than World or Iceborne. It would be a just complete twist, I would imagine, for a lot of people. So we should be expecting that the next game looks closer, visually speaking, fidelity speaking, mechanics speaking, closer to World and Iceborne than the current Rise and Sunbreak for many, many reasons. So in this video, I want to try to talk about, will the next Switch be potentially strong enough to be able to run that game, but also provide a little bit of a context as to pretty much everything we know so far. Obviously, I've made several videos on the next mainline Monster Hunter game already, one of which got a lot of attention because I spoke about the potential of it becoming a PlayStation 5 Pro launch exclusive game next holiday season, basically September, October, November, that kind of thing, launching in 2024. That is when we expect the next mainline PlayStation console to launch, the PlayStation 5 Pro. Also, I followed that video up by discussing Mochizuki's discussion, a journalist for Bloomberg, discussing that Capcom themselves have said that their next mainline unannounced game, a big major selling point for them, a big seller for them, a multi-million-dollar seller game, will be launching before March of 2024. So for their fiscal 2023 year, they expect massive incomes to come in because they're expecting a currently unannounced game, that is the specific quote here, for it to launch before March of 2024, which changes the dynamic a little bit. It makes us reconsider, will the next mainline Monster Hunter game, which is of course the game that we expect Capcom to be talking about, because of course they just released Street Fighter, Resident Evil 5 is launching, I believe in 2025 is what, based off of the leaks that we know regarding Resident Evil. Unless it's a Devil May Cry game or Mega Man for whatever reason, we shouldn't expect it to be any of those two. They haven't provided us any reason as to believe why. We know major details are coming from the next mainline Monster Hunter game, so we should be expecting it to launch probably around March of next year, which leads us to have a discussion. Well, if it's set to launch in March, and we know the next mainline Nintendo Switch is actually launching next holiday based off of just every single leak. I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below for the VGP Video Games Chronicle article that they just recently put out, where they actually provided us a little bit closer details as to what we can expect to see regarding this console. An 8-inch LCD screen, which a lot of people are lamenting because it's not an OLED screen, 512 gigabytes of internal storage, late 2024 launch, somewhere around September or October, which of course basically means that Monster Hunter 6, World 2, Paradise, whatever, had already been out in the market for about 6 months or so by the time that the next Switch launches. And this, of course, new Switch will launch with a brand new Mario game, a new cartridge format for physical media and stuff like that, which that's fine. That's all well and dandy. Doesn't really mean anything when it comes to Monster Hunter. But it essentially means what I just said a second ago. Monster Hunter 6 World 2 Paradise would have been out in the market now for 6 months by the time that this new Switch launches. So it would be up to Capcom to then decide, hey, is this new platform something worth investing on? Do we have a timed exclusivity deal with PlayStation on Asian markets, which will limit us from being able to release this game in Japan, which is of course a massive seller for Monster Hunter, specifically on the next Nintendo Switch. Would Capcom opt out to do that, or would they realize, hey, this game can sell 10 to 15 million copies on a Nintendo Switch because we have base Monster Hunter Rise as an example of a Nintendo Switch console, paving the way for Monster Hunter to continue to be profitable on a Nintendo Switch device. Will that provide them more than enough, confirmation to basically make the game, forget the argument that the Switch 2 would be potentially strong enough to be able to run technically wise the next mainline Monster Hunter game. Is Capcom, do they see a potential in sales? And if they do, then will they make it available on day one? Would it be one of those games? We will be able to see plenty of games that have already released in 2024. Major titles, but they eventually launched day one on Switch because, of course, there's a massive audience waiting for a new Switch, and they would be more than happy to take that game and play it on the go. Will that be the move that they opt out to make? And that is essentially the conversation that I'm hoping to have in this video. At the same time, though, there is a lot of discussion. This is something that I saw Digital Foundry discuss when it comes to the technical aspects of what this potential new Nintendo Switch could be. They expect to have a DLSS 2.0 at the very least. What DLSS does, for those who aren't uninitiated on this very basic tech that a lot of people are actually already using on their PC games, but they might not necessarily know because it's just one of those things they have checked off or checked on by default, and they don't really pay attention to it. Essentially what it means is that it upscales an image from a very low resolution and it upscales it to a high resolution image. We see games like, for example, Remnant 2, which is a PlayStation 5 Series X game, for example. Natively on PlayStation 5, that game is running at 720p resolution. It's like the same screen, the same resolution that the Nintendo Switch, normal Nintendo Switch runs at in handheld mode. But they upscale that image to 1440p. So it actually looks relatively good, very clean, and that game is running on PlayStation 5, and no one's really complaining about the game looking really bad or poor. It runs upscaled, so it looks really clean. It looks very sharp. You should be seeing some of those images on the screen right now. So that's what DLSS does. It makes a game that's natively internally is running at a low resolution, and it blows it up to look really good at a high resolution. What does that mean? Well, it essentially means that you're playing on your 4K TV, and the game that you typically would have expected to look blurry because you're playing at a low resolution in your handheld device. Now it looks really good on the TV, because it's actually being upscaled properly through DLSS. And that's one of the main technologies that we expect the next mainline Nintendo Switch console to have, is DLSS fully enabled, because they have the support of NVIDIA, and that is something that NVIDIA basically invented all on their own. They have been working on that for many years, I believe about a decade or so. So yeah, technically speaking, it could be a upgraded Tegra, of course, that's what we expect. But at the end of the day, DLSS is something that the Switch currently doesn't probably do. It doesn't really have the option to be able to do it, but the next mainline Switch will by default, which means that upgraded visuals will not necessarily be that much of a hindrance. At the same time, I spoke in the previous video regarding the potential of a next mainline Monster Hunter game also launching on PlayStation, Xbox One consoles, aka last gen. Why would they do that? Well, take the example of the latest Star Wars game, for example. I believe it's Jedi Survivor. Jedi Survivor launched as a PlayStation 5 Series X, Series S PC game, and it didn't meet the sales expectations. It is a massive Star Wars game investment. They wanted it to basically sell more than they did, and EA basically said, well, let's make it available on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, because there's still 20 million something people on PlayStation 4, another 30 to 40 million playing on Xbox One. Why should we limit them from not being able to play our game? So they're not making it backwards compatible and all of that, and they're basically going to re-release it on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One for you to be able to play that game on those consoles, and on the hope that they're going to be able to sell more copies. Capcom isn't shying away from things like that. We know that they have been doing that in the past, and we saw them do it with just Sunbreak alone right now. The game was originally in Rise as well, a Nintendo Switch exclusive, then it came to PC. We knew that, but it was never meant to come to PlayStation or Xbox. And then 2 years later, there it was. So it's one of those things where even a 6-month window, let's say the game does launch on March of 2024 on PlayStation 5, Series X, Series S, and PC. 6 months later, the Switch 2 comes out. Capcom has it readily available on day one because they don't want to miss out on those sales. I think that is something that Capcom would be more than happy to do. And of course, based off of the tech that we have been seeing so far, the Switch is probably going to be no different than like a Steam Deck at this point. Obviously not as big, not as chunky, not as heavy. Obviously, you would hope Nintendo can figure that out. But it's basically going to be as powerful as a Steam Deck. I mean, you know the Steam Deck is going to be able to run the next Monster Hunter game. Probably at 30 FPS, yes, sure. While the game runs at 60 on PlayStation 5 and Series X. But, you know, it wouldn't be any different. And at the end of the day, that's what players want to be able to see. Obviously, I mean, Rise right now, you know, is limited to the PlayStation 5 counterpart, to the Series X counterpart, and of course, PC Steam. But it doesn't stop anyone like myself specifically playing it on the Switch because that's where my character is. Now, of course, the arguments regarding crossplay and cross saves and all of that, those are secondary, and we certainly hope to see that going forward, making the transition, you know, the funny transition of like bringing your character from PC, PlayStation, or Xbox to the Nintendo Switch environment. That would be fantastic to see. But of course, that's an argument for another day. If you're brand new to my channel, though, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.